Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Nguyen with Building IQ, and welcome to our webinar on an holistic approach to building operations. Webinar is scheduled for about an hour today. We may run a little short or a little long, depending on Q&A. And today's session is really meant to be a highly interactive panel discussion. With that, I'd like to introduce our panel discussion, an holistic approach to building operations. Today we have four speakers, and I'm going to introduce them all now. The first one is going to be Michael Nark, who is the president and CEO of Building IQ. Prior to Building IQ, Michael served as the president and CEO of Power Analytics, and prior to that was president and CEO of Prenova, an energy management and services provider to the commercial industrial marketplace. And prior to that, he did a stint with Geocom, which was a fleet management software provider for the oil and gas industry. Our next speaker will be Jennifer Kearney. Jennifer is the executive partner and founder of Gotham 360, where she serves as director of energy programs for the New York Presbyterian Hospital, the largest not-for-profit, non-sectarian hospital in the United States, where she managed over a $70 million energy procurement portfolio. Jennifer founded Gotham 360 to support other healthcare organizations with strategies for the development and deployment of energy programs. Gotham is currently recognized as a groundbreaking women-owned business. Following Jennifer, we will have Gwen Kilvert speak. Gwen is the Senior Director of Planning and Real Estate at the YMCA of Greater New York, where she oversees mission-based real estate projects, including strategic plans for the organization's guest room business and portfolio-wide energy management, as well as responsibility for land use and regulatory matters. And last but not least, we will hear from Gustavo Reyna. Gustavo manages the Intel business development and go-to-market strategy and programs for the Intel's IoT software solution partners. He works with facility managers, building management companies, building automation groups, and designers to fully understand the challenges and opportunities in the building automation sector. And Gustavo brings extensive expertise in IoT services, global marketing, and product management. So that's our lineup of speakers. And with that, we will get going, and I will hop in again periodically to ask questions and also introduce the transitions. I'd just like to start real quickly with a Building IQ snapshot. And we are a building technology-enabled building services company, primarily focused in the commercial office space market, with also extensive activities in areas like hospitals, education facilities, shopping malls, etc. We have a global business, and we work with utilities in the United States primarily and Australia, as well as other regulatory agencies. So we have about 125 million odd square feet under service, and we offer a full suite of services for energy management, beginning with visualization through analytics, workflow, control, and finally predictive energy optimization. So that's us. Again, welcome to our webinar, and again, special thanks to our speakers. And now I'd like to hand it off to Michael Nark, our first speaker, who's president and CEO of Building IQ.
Thank you, Steve. Let me reiterate good morning to everyone in the West, afternoon in the East, and for those who are down under, a very early morning, and in the far, far West, a late evening as well. But thank you all for joining us. Excited today to have the opportunity to speak with my fellow panelists about the holistic approach to building operations, and to kind of kick it off with an approach, if you will, that Building IQ has frankly worked on and developed and fostered over a number of years now to arrive at this position, I guess I would say, from our company's perspective, but also the market's perspective, as we talk about the homogenation of IoT and all the ins and outs associated with IoT, sustainability, et cetera. So with that, let me just mention a few things and a few components about holistic, and then hopefully be able to have some very active live interaction from question and answer period. So first of all, when we think about holistic and the concept of holistic, I think, in simple terms, our view or vision around that is really a sum of parts, or sum of all the parts, and bringing everything together from an interconnected perspective, and more specifically, looking at all the components to solve a problem versus taking a singular view. And I think so, for instance, a great example historically around one of the topics that we're obviously all on this call to discuss of energy. I think historically the view would have been to think about things and think about issues and items only in terms of energy and energy only, and not think about impact of maintenance as an example, or other operational parameters, et cetera, that comes into play there. So again, the concept of holistic is to look at and understand all of the influencing drivers and components that affect the output or that affect the change that you're trying to make. And last but not least, just take the concept or utilize the concept as treat the system as a whole, and not break it down into silos, but look at it as a whole and perhaps drive that to solve a singular problem, but more specifically starting at that holistic level with leveraging and utilizing all the pieces and parts of data and information that we have available to us today, that probably was available to us historically, but the systems were not in place to make that happen. And I think the big leap today is that those systems are now in place to make that happen and to allow that to happen, so that we can essentially look at everything at once versus looking at things individually. So that's our introduction to holistic, and the holistic approach then leads to various ways or paths to optimization. And everyone, I'm sure, has heard and understands the concept of the digital twin. In perhaps more simple terms, from my perspective, what a holistic approach allows us to do is to, in direct terms, create a parallel approach or a parallel view of what is happening, what could happen, what can be analyzed, what can be tested, and doing all of these things in advance, if you will. Some use the terminology of modeling and building a model, and then essentially having the model project what's going to happen, and then drive some what if then scenarios against that. But the view for us is to create a model that has as much of the data and information as possible, to then utilize that model to create and drive this digital twinning process that allows us to test the parameters, do what if scenario planning and whatnot, and then be able to effectuate change. And then the last component of that we believe is super important around the digital twin is that digital twin has got to be dynamic. So it's got to continue to learn as the building learns. Just like our people continue to learn, so does the model, and so does the digital twin have to learn. And again, the only way that digital twin learns is through having that holistic approach, by having data constantly fed to it and essentially delivering the output from that point. So functionally, holistic view of data allows us to create the digital twin. That digital twin then allows us to do some analysis on the data pieces and parts. And that, from a building IQ perspective, is what we call the building IQ way. And that building IQ way obviously takes a look at all of the interconnected systems and brings all that information back onto a single platform, whether that be weather, operational practices, maintenance practices, tenant comfort, asset performance, perhaps one that is very much overlooked. A building is built a certain way and it's designed as built, but then it's operated completely differently. So being able to understand the differences between as built and as operated, and bringing all that together onto the central platform so that all that information can be viewed and visualized. Steve had mentioned the first facets of our platform, which is visualization. And then of course, what we're talking about today around the digital twin concept is the analytics that come with that as well. Ultimately, the goal is to do closed loop optimization, and that's certainly what the model allows us to do. And so that 5i platform, by virtue of taking and delivering the holistic approach, we believe changes the paradigm a bit. Conceptually, you may have heard us call it Industry 4.0. Intention of Industry 4.0 is that it's different than Industry 1.0, and Industry 2.0, it's that step change. And that step change allows us to have a significantly different result or benefit to be delivered to the end user or the client by looking at things holistically. And so once again, it's not only just that energy benefit or the siloed operational benefit, it's essentially what is impacted across the board by looking at labor, services, the resource and processes that are there, the assets, and how utilized the assets are, to then result and deliver a significant impact across whether it's maintenance dollar, not whether it is, but in conjunction with maintenance dollars, productivity increases, downtime, throughput, et cetera. So what in the past would have been singularly viewed as a reduction in consumption of X percent can now be presented and should actually be presented from a more holistic perspective that says, yes, we have had this impact on energy, but also here's what's been impacted from a maintenance, a productivity, a downtime, and a throughput perspective. Historically, we probably would not have been able to present that to the client because all the data wasn't available, i.e. the digital twin wasn't there either to show them. But now all that being on a single platform can allow us to bring that holistic approach to the client base and to the market as well. And I think I'll close with the real world benefit of this is that, we've been at this for quite some time, but the real world benefit is, again, very significant improvements that are presented and delivered in terms of comfort and productivity from the workforce point of view, asset performance itself, operational improvements from a sequencing of a start-stop perspective, water and waste benefit from obviously a closed loop chiller analysis and things of that sort, and more traditional Energy Star portfolio manager kind of reporting, et cetera. But I think what I want to end with is the holistic approach that we're bringing to the market, and my panelists will of course continue to talk about that as well and dig deeper into it. It just gives us the opportunity to look at everything together as one versus singular solo approach. The benefit of being able to look at everything together at one on a single platform allows us to then model that appropriately, drive it through the digital twinning process, and the impact being a much greater return on investment or a much greater value proposition that spans the various components of maintenance operations, comfort, et cetera. So I think that's the introduction piece from my perspective, Steve. Appreciate the time, and I hope you all felt it was at least a valuable introduction.
Great, thank you. We have a question came in. Can you expand that, Laura? The question is from a client's perspective, what do they need to do, the owner-occupant, to benefit completely from the holistic approach that you described? Or how do you address the split incentive situation in other situations?
So I think first and foremost, a couple of different answers there, a couple of different components to delve into. So first and foremost, in order for it to be successful both across the tenant as well as the owner experience is consistency of buy-in and consistency of outcome, meaning what is benefit that's going to happen. When there is potentially conflict where the owner / operator of a building may take on the holistic approach and drive benefit and savings through the building, but not then essentially enable that to manifest itself to the tenant level in terms of savings for the tenant, there is obviously a misalignment there. And I think it's acceptable to have that misalignment, but the reality is if that misalignment is in place, we can't expect to have significant benefit from a comfort point of view if that tenant isn't engaged in part of the whole entire process, and vice versa. So I think that just has to be taken into account in the initial steps of when we speak holistically about a specific subset of buildings, owner occupied, tenant, et cetera, that just has to be actually validated and thought about and put in place early on to understand where the value proposition is all the way across. Great,
thank you. So our next speaker is Jennifer from Gotham 360, who is Gavin, the founder and executive partner at this women-owned business. So Jennifer, if you would.
Thank you so much. This is Jennifer Carney. My firm is Gotham 360, and we are energy management consultants that focus on the development of programs as opposed to working on any specific energy issue like a procurement or a demand side project or demand response. We work really to weave all of those different elements together. We divide up our kind of service into 4 kind of general buckets: procurement, resiliency, sustainability, and efficiency. And we work across all different types of vertical sectors with a particular focus on the not-for-profits. So in addition to supporting procurements, we do work to develop distributed energy with a focus on clean distributed energy generation. We have done a number of combined heat and power projects. We are starting to get into the renewable energy sector with an initial project to do some solar PV for the Brooklyn Brewery. We think that although fossil fuels are falling out of general favor from the perspective of carbon, we're a big proponent of energy diversity, where fossil fuels, nuclear, and renewables all have a part to play in serving the future grid.
Jennifer, if I could interrupt, a question came in regarding the concept of smart buildings, particularly with regard for not-for-profits. And so how do not-for-profits play in the smart building space, and how has that affected what your company does?
So smart building technologies like Building IQ are certainly what we would consider a tool in the toolbox. Where this comes into particular play with not-for-profit organizations is that these organizations tend to be permanently invested in their buildings, as opposed to a REIT or a very traditional commercial real estate owner-operator, where the strategy tends to be acquire, invest as little as possible, and flip it for a profit. So I would say that smart building technologies play a very important role for not-for-profits in terms of gaining visibility into their building loads and really identifying the best opportunities for conservation and savings.
Follow-on question for that was, does that mean your business is seeing a lot of IoT solutions as well, given that they are long-term holders?
We are definitely seeing an uptick in IoT, but I would kind of put IoT and smart buildings into the same general category.
Okay.
Steve, could I interject with a question for Jennifer as well?
Absolutely.
Jennifer, I'm just curious from your perspective, being that you do offer and deliver a consulting service that essentially spans, if you will, both sides of the meter, i.e. the procurement being, if you will, what you buy it at, and then obviously on the demand side being what you use it at. From just a market focus point of view, are you seeing any adoption or interest in really connecting those two together such that an energy efficiency program leads and is connected in with a procurement program or vice versa? Or are those still functionally treated as two different components kind of in the supply chain?
No, we're definitely seeing a big trend on the integration of those two components, and specifically where it relates to either demand response or price responsive load, where loads can be shifted or potentially curtailed in response to a real-time pricing signal.
Terrific. So not everybody's going after the block purchase and locking it in for a 12-month or a 24-month period of time and just kind of letting it go. There's much more proactiveness coming into play there because they can realize there's some significant benefit there in terms of savings.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for cost reduction and even cost stabilization by adopting a strategy that integrates load management in response to real-time pricing.
Terrific. Thank you.
One more question came in, and that is for the long-term building holders. Does that imply also that you deal with a lot of older buildings? And what does that mean in terms of implementing programs that are for smart buildings?
So I think that is a great question to also discuss with Gwen from the YMCA, which is our case study project, but the answer is yes. So we work with building owners who tend to be permanently invested in their buildings, and they include a wide variety of building usage and a wide variety of building age. So we have owners of buildings that just opened in 2019, and we have owners of buildings that have been open since the early 1900s. So we run the full gamut of age and building type. And I think that doing any sort of building retrofit on older buildings is much more complicated to put together, but so worthwhile because those are the buildings that we really need to focus on to get the best return. There's just a tremendous opportunity for improvements in the older building stock. And with a little bit of investment and attention, you can really turn it into, a solid performer for energy use intensity.
Great, thank you. Which actually is a great segue into our next speaker from the YMCA of Greater New York, Gwen Kilvert, who's Senior Director of Planning and Real Estate. Gwen?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you. And that is a great segue. Jennifer is and Gotham 360 is an energy consultant for the YMCA of Greater New York, and I thought I would take you through a project that has really been underway for the last maybe 6 months, but we're really hitting the ground with some really important elements of it. I thought I'd start first with who we are. Many of you are familiar with the YMCA, and especially in North America, associate us with fitness facilities, which is definitely the profile of many of our buildings here in New York City. We're a nonprofit and we're a community service organization. So in addition to those fitness centers, we offer a lot of different programming around health and wellness, as well as after-school programs. We're the largest YMCA in North America, and yes, we are very old. Our average building age is about 54 years. We manage about 1.6 million square feet across the 5 boroughs here in New York City. And I think we're a great example of a resource-constrained organization managing a portfolio that is very old, and we have limited automation and smart building technologies. And so this project that I'm going to be taking you through is a great example of really our debut in trying to implement some more smart controls and data visualization in our portfolio. Really, a lot of what we do with Gotham 360 is driven by a lot of local laws around energy efficiency, but certainly taking advantage of a lot of the incentives that both our state agency here, NYSERDA, as well as the utilities here are offering. And this is a grant as part of a funding opportunity that both Building IQ and Gotham 360 partnered on with the YMCA. And you can see the grants that we received for this remote energy manager pilot. So with Building IQ's meters and data visualization, Gotham 360 brings our 22 locations energy advising services. And so in the next slide, you'll see that this is really our holistic approach to building operations using the Building IQ technology in concert with Gotham 360's advising. We find that it's a great engagement tool for our branch managers who have a variety of skills when it comes to not only systems, but certainly software and anything related to computers. We have Gotham 360 developing plans for each of our branch managers. These plans have energy reduction strategies that they then implement, and then we can realize the benefit of these strategies through measurement and verification in Building IQ. And this cycle could go on indefinitely as Gotham 360 relays, more strategies and opportunities to our branch managers. We found that in general, Building IQ offers our branch managers an opportunity to really get into really the hour by hour operation of their branch and see, playing around with it. They've become much more engaged in our energy consumption and certainly energy savings. And so this is just an illustration of our really ground level work. We're taking baby steps here. This is an example of some of the work that we're doing with the branches. Our McBurney branch is on 23rd Street here in Manhattan. And this is just a little test run that we did to see how scalable it would be to try to manage our fitness equipment load. As a fitness center, we have a lot of these machines plugged in and drawing power 24/7. So this was something that we did to show our building operators, if we were to scale this across our entire portfolio, what we could see in annual savings.
Question came in, Gwen. Can you comment a little bit more on the engagement statement you made earlier? How is that actually?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely become a part of our trainings for our building operators. It's been an opportunity to reach out to them to really dive into Building IQ and to interact with it so that they can not only relay back to us things that they're seeing in the platform that they have questions about, but it's a great way for them to be more accountable to really the other side of our business, which is the membership piece of our business. How do we explain anomalies, or how do we relay information back to our energy profile in a building to the people who run our membership programs. And we think that in time, as our building operators become more savvy and more comfortable in the Building IQ space, that they'll become much more proactive and will start proposing ways to curtail their load.
Another question came in about the, did you have to install physical meters? And if so, what is the accuracy of this metering? So maybe that's a question for both
Right.
Jennifer and Gwen.
Right. I mean, I'll just start by saying, this is step one for us. And so we started initially as part of this pilot program just installing a master meter at all of our locations. And this is only an electricity meter. So right now we're only able to see the data coming from these direct meters for electricity. But certainly in time, we would love to be able to expand that and start to do some sub-metering and maybe get some other utilities onto the platform as well.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask a question of you first, but then we're going to bring it back around. And this has to do with New York's new carbon reduction policies. Could you comment on that and what it means to
Jennifer,
the Y?
Oh, what it means to the Y? Oh, are you referring to the local laws that we have here, or are you referring to the recent legislation that is working through our city council?
The recent legislation.
I'm going to defer to Jennifer on this one, and then I can chime in specifically about what it means to the YMCA.
So I think that what we're talking about here is the pending legislation to cap carbon emissions in buildings 25,000 square feet or above. As Gwen mentioned, this is something that is circulating at the city council level. It hasn't passed. So at this point, we can just really comment on the different versions of the legislation that we've had a chance to take a look at. I think that, we definitely applaud the city on the goals that are set forth in the legislation and the underlying need to address climate change. I think that we have some issues with the way that the carbon penalties are working out and where those caps are set in terms of building types. I don't know if I can really comment with greater detail than that, given the fact that we're talking about some very aspirational legislation that is still in the development phase.
Okay.
And I could comment as a mission-based organization. I mean, regulations in general can be challenging for us here in New York City. In addition to energy policy, we have a lot of land use constraints as well that we face, requirements that require us to invest in things that we would rather spend those dollars on ways to reinvest in our communities and in our programs. And there's always that struggle to prioritize, what the city is regulating and how we can continue to further our mission.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Steve, I was just going to ask one other question, Gwen, coming back to kind of the initiatives underway from an energy efficiency perspective and being a non-for-profit and really an integral part of the community. Are there any plans to essentially package and position that as a way to drive membership, to inform membership or the community of the benefits that are being reaped, or is it still a bit too early from that perspective?
Yeah, I think we're not internally. We've realized the synergies there. I think that in serving these communities that tend and some of them are very much underserved communities. It's certainly our services to those communities dovetails nicely with a commitment to environmental stewardship and clean air and water and all of that. That is not a narrative that we've tended to lead with, but I think that as the city evolves, it continues to evolve its legislation, and we get our feet underneath us more with our work with Gotham 360. That's certainly a message that I think could, be probably very well received and sincere too.
Terrific. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And now I'd like to hand over to our last speaker, Gustavo Reina, who is the Business Development Manager with Intel. Gustavo, are you ready?
Thank you very much, Steve. Yes, absolutely. And thank you, everybody, for attending this webinar today. I would like to start by really adding the IoT perspective and emphasizing a point that Michael made earlier in his presentation. Historically, building automation is an industry driven primarily by energy efficiency and sustainability goals. I mean, in the US alone, 30% of energy waste comes from commercial and industrial buildings. However, the industry has come to realize that comfort and productivity are also very important factors that drive the need for better indoor environment quality management. we see that there are significant economic benefits that we can realize by increasing the productivity of the people working in buildings. Therefore, maximizing worker comfort and productivity are becoming as important an operational goal as minimizing energy use. And finally, the advancement of IoT technologies and the standards and the interoperability are making smart building transformation possible. So this is really a fundamental part where we can begin to build all of these solutions. So although initially smart buildings were defined with energy management and sustainability in mind, today's smart building vision is really about delivering experiences to its occupants and insights to the facility managers. When a building can sense its environment, its occupant preferences, be able to connect disparate systems in order to provide services to its occupants, that is really what we call smart. Think of adding conference rooms, scheduling, security, entrance, the transit through the building, knowledge of occupancy in certain rooms or floors, all important things. And in a number of use cases related to businesses and care facilities, it is even more crucial for the facility to be aware of the patterns of movement and the presence of the occupants in the space, whether that is for personal safety or to provide the customer or the workforce insights so that the business and the facility manager can better improve the efficiency of their facility. As an industry in IoT, the industry has been adopting and integrating a diverse array of building management and building automation systems. Some of these systems can drive the cost of implementation and limit the ability to have a unified view and a management of the entire facility, which is really what Michael was talking about earlier. Now with the Internet of Things, what is happening is that additional intelligence is being shared between these systems. For example, connecting HVAC systems to the cloud to provide new insights, to do remote management, predictive maintenance, and developing new service models. And that really, as Wen was saying, is really just the beginning, a first step. The real value is when all of these smart systems share data intelligence with each other and then drive the experiences of the occupants of the facility, really becoming a smart facility. As many of you know from your own experiences, some of the challenges of implementing smart buildings have been the lack of interoperability across systems or concerns about security when connecting things to the internet. Therefore, I think in the IoT world, what Intel sees is that open standards-based solutions in the ecosystem that make that interoperability possible is really what can drive the cost down and ensure end-to-end security to protect the network, the devices, the data, and really giving you facility managers peace of mind. So in conclusion, just let me say that IoT technologies can enable this seamless integration of sensors, actuators, and data gateways, building automation systems, service applications, and that enables a secure transport of the information across cloud systems and business analytics to make the facility less complex, less costly, at the same time more efficient and more secure. And so some of the use cases that you've seen here demonstrate the ability to collect the data from sophisticated sensors and securely aggregate it, orchestrate it, analyze it. This data can provide amazing insight into the functionality of the facility. This is really what helps dramatically improve the experience of its occupants and improve the interactions between the occupants, the customers, with services and facilities.
Great, thank you, Gustavo. That concludes the speaker portion of our webinar, and we're going to open up to general Q&A and panel discussion at this point. However, before we do that, I'd like to comment on this kind of cyclic noise we're all hearing. So I'm going to ask all speakers to go on mute unless you're going to answer a question directly. We don't know where it's coming from, but we're trying to chase down that noise, so bear with us, and hopefully it's not too distracting. So the first question, we're going to follow up with some comments from Gustavo, and that is, can one company do it all? And I assume not because of your role. And then the follow-up question to that is, given that one company can't do it all, what's missing from the mix right now as far as Intel is concerned in terms of delivering the holistic building system?
Fabulous. And this is really what brings us to how complex this environment is really, right? And when we see at an infrastructure level is two things come to play. And this is really the point I was trying to make. One is that there exists some standard and interoperability between systems. And two is that they can communicate securely. But once, for example, once you implement something like Building IQ, you may later on find a different kind of sensor that can tie maybe the security system or the entrance system or the parking lot, or some occupant-based sensor that can tell you if a room is empty or not, so that you can regulate the temperature, or whether people are transiting through hallways or through a store or any other part of the building, so that you can determine better how to manage it. And so, short answer is it takes a lot of different sensors and pieces to make it all happen, but implementing initially this smart infrastructure would enable all of that to be added on as you need it.
And then what are the key challenges then facing buildings as you see it from an ecosystem perspective?
Right. When I talk to facility managers, two things are very important. One is their IT folks are making sure and really need to trust that all of these new systems are secure, that they won't add any kind of challenge to the IT security. And so it's very important to assure IT of that. And the second one is interesting. It's a little bit more of a business thing. When a facility manager is really proposing a change or improvement to the building, they need to make sure that they have a really good business case. So a lot of the challenges has been, is it too complex? Is it too expensive? We don't know if it's secure. All of which has really been addressed and responded and improved with IoT implementations.
And Gwen and Jennifer, could you both comment on the idea of security with IoT implementations or solutions?
Jennifer, I don't know if you want to start. I'm not sure I have much to add.
No, that response was pretty comprehensive, but I think that in any building environment, from the least sophisticated building operator to like a hospital, highly regulated environment, security of data is a growing concern. Cybersecurity is a growing concern, and it's something that we generally try to reserve extra time in our project schedules to address and vet out, because there are multiple stakeholders that need to kind of render their opinions in terms of the way that things are connected, the flow of information, and the potential for outside influences to gain access to either building automation or other building systems that they really should not have access to.
Okay, and could you extend that to the notion that Gustavo introduced of open standards and communications, and what does that mean when you start a partnership with a company like ours or other companies when choosing your partners, your go-to-market partners? I mean, how do you view these standards and communications issues that Gustavo raised?
I mean, we are always looking in terms of communication for open protocols, Modbus, BACnet. As this is not really like my personal area of expertise, so I don't know if I can really speak to it with further granularity.
Okay, this is just a general. Go ahead,
Steve. Just Michael, I wanted to actually throw something back to Gustavo to have him kind of highlight is just the whole evolution of the three letters IoT and the adoption of that as being in the early days, something that frankly the market really didn't know, didn't understand, and how that's evolved over time. And from your perspective, are you seeing more of a comfort around those three letters when people use those three letters?
Right. No, it is a great question, especially when you think about investments, right? And I think what we're seeing, number one, is that ecosystem is growing, so that a variety of sensors can be implemented into a system. A management system like you use can interface with analytics, with security, with cameras, with video surveillance, with a number of other really great solutions that add on to the holistic approach that you were talking about, Michael. And so, yes, we see, number one, One, there's a lot of implementations already in place that demonstrate that ability to be secure, from the hardware to the way the gateways communicate to each other, to the way you may have some of the data moving to the cloud in different under different secure patterns. From an Intel perspective, really, even from the security of the hardware, from the moment it ships from a factory through all of the integrity of who's owned that piece of hardware throughout the entire travel through the facility and installation and management. All of those little factors have added on to a much larger level of comfort, and one that investors are, investors meaning building owners or those who manage the budget, are really important to factors to consider, which is there is not a single investment that puts them in a silo. You mentioned silos earlier, but this being interoperable systems, you can add other things to them and integrate them to other existing systems without having to rebuild your technology.
Thank you. Another question came in regarding what kind of measures can be identified beyond scheduling. I'm not sure if this is aimed at whom, but it's for everyone, I guess.
Without trying not to monopolize the discussion here, one of the measurement things that we can understand is, and one of the great new things that have happened is the productivity of people working in buildings. Because if a room is more comfortable, we've seen that with a number of technology companies. If the rooms are more comfortable, people tend to take less breaks outside of the building or move into other areas or avoid some of the common areas. And so even productivity is a great measurement. But certainly, as Gwen and Jennifer know, just the moment you begin to measure the energy usage in your building, just the moment you understand what it is that your base measurement is, that really begins to lead you into where you can save. Whatever.
Yeah, definitely. We certainly have seen that.
You have seen that. Okay. I guess along the same measure, same line is for Gwen. What do you said you started with visualization with this project. What do you expect the next step to be?
Well, Gotham 360 is going to be building a database that will really be documenting all of the strategies that the branches have enacted and really measuring their results, so that we'll have a robust database of really what are actionable steps that our operators can take that yield particular saving. So for us, I think it's just that knowledge warehousing that's going to be an important next step. I would think that in time, a big push will be to try to get Building IQ into some more of our energy intensive systems to get sub-meters on equipment around our pools in particular. That's a big energy consuming area in our buildings. So I think it's going to be a combination of really building a robust database of energy conservation measures that yield the greatest savings and trying to expand the Building IQ presence in our buildings.
Okay. So some clarity was provided on the measures question, specifically what measures beyond AHU and lighting start-stop is expected or could be gleaned from either Building IQ's current implementation or other IoT type solutions. Maybe Steve, Michael, you could take a cut at that. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that. I was actually going to jump in earlier on the question of scheduling as well, and I think in simplistic terms, scheduling is very much the low-hanging fruit. And I think as we've found, and as just the concept of a holistic approach comes into play, it's natural that you look at scheduling as the first piece and part, because usually that's a set and forget concept, right? We start the building at X and we shut the building down at Y. Yet over time, that sometime overrides go into play. Overrides tend to stick there for a long period of time, and hence you have obviously energy usage. Scheduling is just more of a best practice starting point, and then we kind of move up from there. And then the questions that gets more refined is if we say at the air handling unit and or at the VAV level as well are appropriate areas to look at. And I think before you even think about the AHU and those VAV concepts, it's super important to understand, does the building respond the way we all expect it to? I mentioned earlier the as-built versus as-operated. I think part of our experience and evolution about driving to optimization, the premise was always that every building was quote unquote under control, i.e. it did the things that you expected it to do, right? You ask for a set point change, the building responds appropriately. Time and time again, our experience base over the last 7 to 10 years has actually proven that to be not correct and not a very correct assumption. And so I would say the majority of the first several months, right, of work collectively together with the client base is quite frankly getting the building and the assets in the building responding the way that they were either as designed or as built. And so that once you basically get the building and its assets to a point where they respond appropriately, they do the things that you would expect them to do in unison, i.e. that holistic view, then there are the opportunities to go much deeper and wider to the optimization level. But by far, the most amount of time and the most value, frankly, delivered has been spent by us working through that phase of getting a building to its, if you will, repeatability level. Meaning that, if you make a set point change on floor 1, you understand how floor 1 responds versus floor 5 versus floor 10. Getting that consistency, i.e. the building in control, is the first step. And then essentially once the building is control, it's repeatable, then you can obviously move to the concept and the expansion of true optimization. And there's many things inside that facet beyond just VAVs, AHUs, scheduling, and those kind of concepts. A lot of it also revolves around the physical energy using assets themselves, making them much more repeatable and much more refined as well.
Thank you. I think that actually relates to one of the questions that came in regarding the importance of standardization of data tagging conventions. I know that's sort of a technical question, but maybe, Jennifer, I would throw that to you to comment on the importance of standardization in general to your business and how it hurts or helps in creating energy programs for your clients.
I think standardization is very important, especially if you're talking about a single owner with multiple sites, because a lot of properties, get acquired later. So there's not a single acquisition of all of the properties, but as a company grows, there is additional acquisition. Having standards makes it a lot easier to kind of initiate and orientate a new property into an overall portfolio. I mean, we definitely like to incorporate standardization into all of our client engagements.
Yeah, and if I could add from Building IQ's perspective, from the product perspective, the whole idea of tagging conventions is increasingly important, especially with haystack and brick conventions being followed by ASHRAE, and we ourselves are incorporating tagging conventions, particularly at the asset level, which tends to drive activity. And once the tagging conventions are in place, it's easier for us to manipulate data as objects as we go through an effort to define more and more granular anomalies. So it's very important from a Building IQ perspective that there are standardized tagging conventions. Since we implement our own anyway, we would adopt industry ones and expand them beyond the brick conventions. And the reason we are doing that is so that we can do analytics at a deeper level where we're basically treating all data objects similarly and looking for correlations and influence across data objects. If the other part of that question and answer is going to go to Gustavo, which is you also mentioned the importance of standards, does Intel play a role in helping to define some of these tagging conventions that are being asked about?
We do, and I think beyond just the technology, the role that Intel takes in the market is precisely that. It's just participating not only on the standard bodies in developing some of the proposals for standards, but also ensuring that when we build this ecosystem, that really the fundamental piece is that everybody can communicate on their certain basic level of standards so that we can really assure that there is not only interoperability, as I said earlier, but for the managers, the facility managers to be able to train users to understand how to go beyond a single system into really a multi-vendor environment that they have to manage.
Great, thank you. We are just about out of time, so I just have one more wrap-up question for each of the panelists. It's the same question for everyone, and that is, what is missing and why are we not doing what is the one thing that the one key piece that's missing in keeping the industry in general from moving completely to a holistic kind of interpretation of building. So we'll start at the top of the queue with Michael, if you want to take first cut at that answer.
Wow, what's missing? I think my simple response to that is commitment and belief. It's probably, those are two words, but commitment and belief that this can happen, does happen, and is not mysterious in any way, shape, or form. And so I think that's what's missing, and it takes all of us on this call and on this webinar to continue to drive that trust and belief that this evolution has happened and can continue to drive the mass adoption levels that I think we all want and are all looking for. So it's just that commitment and trust pieces and parts, Steve.
Thank you. Jennifer, same question to you.
So my answer would relate to that. So I think commitment comes from awareness and education. So you can't commit to something that you're not fully aware exists as an opportunity. So one of the things that we're always doing with building owners is explaining the way that technology is moving, what the trends are, what the new opportunities are between the opportunities in the markets and the opportunities with technology, and how the two of those things intersect. So I think that with awareness and education will come the commitment.
Thank you. Gwen, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, from the perspective of someone involved in managing very old buildings, I think that one impediment certainly is cost, and the first cost hurdle for a lot of portfolio managers that have really old buildings, it can be very challenging to deploy these technologies when you are resource constrained or you have these extremely old buildings. In many cases, our buildings over time have sort of morphed into, multiple building lots, and we have kind of a very hodgepodge scheme at some of our locations, making it extremely challenging for us to deploy smart technologies. So I would say, in addition to the education piece, cost is certainly a big piece of it.
Thank you. And Gustavo.
I agree with many of the comments on demystifying the complexity and the cost and the security aspects of implementing a solution. I think we in this panel is doing a fantastic job at doing that, really advancing the knowledge so that facility managers can understand all of those challenges that they're facing to get approval or to get the budget to create programs and projects. But also how we can educate much better in terms of the return on investment for those projects.
Great. And with that, we are at the top of the hour. And so I want to thank all of our speakers for joining us today and spending time discussing this issue and the holistic approach to buildings. And I want to thank everybody who attended the webinar and remind you that we will be sending out a recording link within about 5 to 7 days or so. So have a great day, everyone. And again, thanks to the speakers and thanks to attendees for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.